Good day, everybody. I'm Johan Lottering, the Senior Editor of International Air Affairs. I'm here with Kevin Story, the CEO of the Commercial Aviation Association of Southern Africa, better known as CASA. And we're talking about matters pressing on the industry, such as the 12-year engine overhaul rule that had resulted in the industry taking the regulator to court recently. As we sit here, we are awaiting the final judgment. And we're not going to talk about that today, but we're going to talk about CASA and how the situation in South Africa has devolved to the point where we had to resort to legal action. But firstly, let's get to know what Kevin and CASA is all about. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit more about CASA and its existence and its membership, please?
So CASA is an organization. It's been in existence since 1944, so that's been some time. It is an industry body that incorporates 9 subsections. Some of these are the Helicopter Association, the Association of Non-Scheduled Operators, the Training Organizations Association, the Airports Association. We have drones, we have the suppliers of parts, etc. So there's 9, we call them affiliates, that sit underneath the CASA banner, but look after their own affairs and look after the interests of aviators and aviation commercial activities in South Africa, as well as general aviation. So that's what we do, and we do it quite well, I think.
I believe so, Kevin. And thank you for your leadership. Can you tell us a little bit more about the other organizations that you've had to rope into this collective mass action on the part of the industry?
Absolutely. There are 5 organizations that are dealing with this matter. The one being AMOSA, which is an affiliate of CASA, which is the Maintenance Organizations Association. So these are all the companies that look after the aircraft in South Africa from a mechanical or maintenance perspective. Then we have AWAC. I'm not going to go into the acronyms. This is the Aviation Watch organization in South Africa. This looks at any matters that affect general aviation and commercial aviation in South Africa that might inhibit us from flying, inhibit us from making use of our aircrafts, and looks in line with what is happening with the world's best practice. So that's them. And then we have the Aero Club of South Africa. This is a 102-year-old organization that looks after the recreational aircraft. It also has all the approved persons that are aligned to it. There's a separate organization for that, but all the recreational stuff, the air shows around South Africa, all the competitions, all the record setting, that is where Aero Club comes into play. So there's 5 organizations. All of them are significantly affected by this. And it's across the board, from commercial to the gentleman or lady who operates an aircraft for pleasure. All of us are affected by this ARC 1819 withdrawal and the new Part 43 that has been put in that didn't make provision for what was in ARC 1819.
Very well then. It's a very formidable force then, and very representative. And it must have taken a lot for you guys to mobilize. Kevin, will you tell us then, in your own words and in your opinion, what has brought us to this point where we can no longer negotiate or be amicable? Is it a political motive? Has knowledge and expertise, is that lost? Is it the bureaucracy? Is it political? What's behind this, Kevin?
I think it's got multiple factors. I think obviously the demographics of South Africa need to be represented in the organizations, and that's what our government is trying to put in place. And with all the organizations, the transformation has happened inside the Civil Aviation Authority. However, transformation shouldn't just be for transformation purposes. You need to ensure that skills and expertise and corporate knowledge, the reasons why decisions are made are brought into the mix. And I think in the quest to get the demographics right, I think a lot of the expertise which happens to be held in places in the population that may not represent the demographics as the government would wish. So I think a lot of knowledge has left the regulator, and that has been replaced with young individuals that want to make a difference. However, they've got more of an administrative ideology. And I think a lot of the elements of doing management of change, of using empirical evidence to drive the reasons for change, and that should be safety driven, but it must be balanced with economic imperatives. It cannot all just be safety. If that was the case, we have all aircraft on the ground. And I think the balance has been lost. I think in the past 10 years, a lot of really good experts have left the regulator, be it on retirement and be it for greener pastures. And I just don't think that the leadership understands the gravity of what they've lost. There's also the them and us element. They talk about using experts from the industry, but they don't trust those experts if they don't follow the narrative they wish to put forward. And that's where the challenge comes. I believe that while there is intent at the upper leadership of CAA, I don't think it's filtered down into the middle management and definitely not the lower levels. So the decision making seems to be more of, these are the rules, we apply the rules. However, we make the rules. We can make rules that are correct for South Africa. We follow the recommendations from SACAA, and those recommendations must manifest into properly thought out regulations that best fit our needs in South Africa. It's a large continent, and it has many facets which are very different to Europe or even the Americas. So we need to have a look at what works. And we have an excellent safety record in South Africa. We have excellent engineers. We have excellent companies. CASA represents over 120 organizations in South Africa that employ, that create a lot of the decision making that happens for businessmen in mining, in agriculture, in various facets of the South African economy. So we're a driver. We get people together. And South Africa was always a leader on the continent. And I'm sad to say that we're no longer as big a leader or as good a leader as we should be. And I think many of the other countries that are looking at things more proactively, looking at what they can do correctly for their country, are moving ahead of South Africa, that has lost a little bit in BEE ideology. It's lost a little bit in this transformation agenda, and quite backward looking as to the history of South Africa, rather than taking expertise, moving it forward and having good mentorship programs, transfer of skills, the things that really need. And transfer of skills comes with people normally with age. You normally want to see gray-haired instructors. You want to see the older generation putting back into industry. And that's what you generally find in the CAAs around the world. Here, you can see the average age in our CAA is very young, and therefore is going to make mistakes that could have come or could have been remedied by having the older experienced people making those decisions or inputting into those decisions, as well as a partnership with industry, a true partnership, not just consultation for tick boxing, but consultation for meaningful implementation and coming up with the best solution for what we face.
Right. So, but given there seems to be a little bit of a paradox there. On the one hand, we're scoring top marks with the International Civil Aviation Organization on audits, that's SACAA, the FAA, even the South African Auditor General has given clean audits for the past 11 years. So what seems to be the problem? On the one hand, we conform to international standards in an excellent way, and on the other hand, the industry is at such loggerheads that it cannot contain itself anymore. It has to stand up for its rights. Can you please try and resolve this contradiction for us?
So ICAO is a recommendation organization, and it does fantastic work, don't get me wrong. It comes up with recommendations that are a general fit for all the nations in the world, so that we can all have a similar standard. And then their auditing is mostly of an administrative nature, where they check that you have the functions and the standards and the rules that you have prepared, your regulations are aligned with that. However, they do make a element called filing of differences, which our Department of Transport, along with the Civil Aviation Authority, should be looking at where there are differences and where there are safe alternatives that work for our country, which differs from other countries around the world. And they should be looking at that. South Africa has taken the unique stance of saying that they will implement every recommendation and they do not wish to file differences. And this is a very unfortunate position. It should never be in that state. You should always be prepared to file differences where and when needed. And in this ARC 1819 matter, the rest of the world has got differences that they have filed and different ways of dealing with it. However, our regulator has decided to go down a singular sort of route, which doesn't really require any knowledge or experience or qualifications from inside their department. It merely says we're going to do what manufacturers or OEMs say, and they are driven by commercial gain. So sometimes their ideologies and why they do things is not safety based, but has a commercial element. The other element that is with the regulator, when you are doing tick boxing, etc., and also with ICAO, I think ICAO is slightly at fault when they do their audits. I don't think they come and do spot checks. I do not believe that they look deeply into what's really going on. And I think there's a little bit of, let's call it window dressing that gets put on by most of the regulators around the world when ICAO comes. And I think ICAO has been fostering that sort of element where I think they need to drill in and they need to have more industry participation to see, is it what they are seeing is actually correct? And is the ICAO recommendations working for the country and the operators on the ground in a safe and economically viable manner?
Roger, I understand that totally, and it puts a fantastic light on it. So would you say the filing a difference can only be done when the new rule is more protective or more exacting in practice and more region specific?
I think the recommendations are just that. You have to look at the recommendations and you have to get to the root of why that recommendation is there. And it will be a safety-based recommendation. That is what all of ICAO is trying to achieve, is to reduce accidents and make a cohesive framework that we all operate in. So on that basis, why is that rule put forward or that recommendation put forward? You then got to analyze it. You need to have the qualifications, the people, and the expertise to do that analysis. And you've got to get industry and the regulator together into a cohesive partnership that then will look at it. And then you've got to go and look at your own empirical data. If you're not collecting that data, then you need to make inroads into collecting that data. But South Africa does collect that data. We can take that data, we can look at it from various aspects, and that will then say, right, do we need this recommendation? And if so, how would we best take that recommendation and inculcate it into our culture, into our rules and regulations, so be they the cars and the cats, and into our technical guidance material to enable the prescripts of the Civil Aviation Authority, which is to create a safe and growth environment for aviation in South Africa and to enable us. So I think that part is missing. I think the regulator sees that it's their predetermined turf and they want to control what they do and basically say, if we say it, you must do it. That's a far cry from other regulators which say, industry, come partner with us. Let's look at this. Let's work together. Let's make a correct fit for our country and how we operate, but still aligned with the elements of ICAO.
Okay. So they can take a leaf out of the CRM, the Crew Resource Management Handbooks, and learn a little about autocratic directive versus democratic participative leadership style. We in the second instance, which is definitely what the industry wants, it is to say, give us more participation. That brings us to the point, do you think that we comply, in your opinion and from your perspective, with administrative law? You know that the main tenets, those tenets being, before you make a rule, that you have a consultative process, that the consultative process is broad-based, that it involves the relevant subject matter experts, that you allow considerable time for deliberations and comments, and then to ensure that those rules comply with international best practice, and lastly, that it's sensible and safe and the best interest. So what is your take on that? I know it's a mouthful, Kevin.
I think that we have the systems. The systems are there. We've got what we call the CARCOM process, so the Civil Aviation Regulation Committee, which is set up to go through and develop the rules as a recommendation to the Minister of Transport. So I think the systems are there, but I think the way it's been managed and the way it's been implemented is not working as how it could work. For example, the voting process inside CARCOM, there are various subcommittees, and each of those subcommittees' chairpeople have a vote. And how that has seemed to have been mutated over time is that the heads of those committees are the SACAA officials themselves. Thus, when the Civil Aviation Authority disagrees with an industry perspective or a regulatory change that might be coming, the regulator harnesses all of those individuals of those committees and ensures that they all vote in a certain direction, which then basically dictates to the industry. So it's not an open and free democratic process where each of those chair people of the committees takes what the consensus is from that committee and votes on that basis. They are voting in line with what the regulator is wishing, and generally what the upper leadership is wishing, or whoever is driving a narrative inside the organization. So I think the systems are there, but they are being slightly abused, if I can use that word. Yes. But I don't believe intentionally. It's how it has mutated with how it's been developed. And then I think that there is a lack of trust. Obviously, a lot of people have lost trust in the CARCOM system, so many of the experts don't avail their time because it's a volunteer system. You have to come and give hours and hours of your time, and the regulator gets paid. And sometimes these work groups go on, and we do not get to finality. There is a hidden agenda in some of them where the regulator wants a certain outcome and drives that outcome rather than looking at the problem, finding out a solution that will best work for both industry and the regulator. So I think the regulator has a bit to learn about inclusive consultation. They also believe that consultation, which came out in the recent court case, that consultation does not mean consensus. Now, while consensus is not the aim of the thing, the consultation process needs to be very varied, and it needs to be based on empirical data. I'm seeing less and less that the decision-making is made on true facts and empirical data, or even management of change. And if that is not at the core or the foundation of the decision-making process, and it's merely from an administrative ideology and how it's going to work better for the processes inside the regulator, then you're going to come to the wrong outcome, which we have in many instances, and I can use ARC 1819 as an exact example of that.
Well, that is very enlightening, Kevin. Both of us have sat on the CARCOM processes, and it's simply impractical. It's untenable. I mean, 160 to 200 people participating in a 2-hour meeting. Nobody gets to have their say. So the agenda becomes, let's get this meeting finished. Let's finish this thing, because it goes on and on. We have this paper tiger that's growing every time. and now the leadership style has come to a point where the chairperson exerts a bit of formidable, a formidable approach. Let's get this done. We can't sit here all day, and that translates into a form of groupthink. So you get a core group that tends to agree in the inner circle, and they drive their particular agenda, but it's not necessarily what's in the best interest of the country or the industry. What is your take on that? I know it's a bit of a mouthful.
I think this is where it goes. I'll give you an example. So the Civil Aviation Authority, before they have a CARCOM, have what they call a dry run. Now, for a committee that's going to sit, I do not believe a dry run should be happening to drive where the regulator wants things to go. It should be an open consultative forum where things are driven to get a result that is in the best interest of South Africa. And it shouldn't be that you need dry runs to develop what the outcome should be. That means you are working to an agenda, in my opinion. So I think that needs to stop. I think the terms of reference for the CARCOM process needs to be adjusted. I think the Minister of Transport possibly needs to have a look at how this all works, and are really the recommendations that are coming to the incumbent. It happens to be the Honourable Barbara Creasy at the present time. How is that information brought through to her? And can she be assured that all the elements underpinning it, for example, the empirical evidence collection, the safety risk analysis, the economic impact assessments, which is what ICAO require when they change rules,
yes,
and many of the other regulators do when they change rules. So I think that is missing. I think for audit purposes and for clean audits, the process on the face of it looks like it's working really well. But when you dig down deep into it, you will find exactly as you're saying, it is driving an agenda. It's going through it as quickly as possible. And I can also say, if you go and look at how the process works after the lunch break, when everybody is tired, things seem to move through and seem to slip through. And often when things are not right, it says, well, we've got to get this done. We've got to move this forward, rather than saying, stop the horse, move back to a subcommittee or back to work group phase, because there indeed is a problem. And it seems that the industry voice is sort of overshadowed, or possibly even pushed to the side.
Marginalized.
Yeah, marginalized in
yes,
use of what the certain individuals or leaders in those departments wish to achieve. And sometimes that is for bureaucratic reasons. Sometimes, and I'll hazard to say, it's to make sure certain processes have happened so that they have completed the requirements of their job description, and thus possible bonuses, etc., are able to be enjoyed. So those are possibly conspiracy theories, but there is some merit between looking at how some of these things even come into play. So that's, I don't think it's an easy solution, but I think industry being involved in it, I think having industry expert forums where some of these things are brought to, rather than a free-for-all that whoever comes to the CARCOM process is the ones that make the decision. Sometimes it's better to have somebody that doesn't want to be there making the decisions and coming up with things, because they're going to serve the purpose quicker and more effectively than some people that want to come there because it assists them in wasting their day, to be blunt.
Kevin, thank you. We have reached a point where we have consolidated all these arguments. It seems a resolution or a resolve isn't imminent. It seems we need to have a look at the CAA leadership, and we need to create forums. But you've certainly ignited a new path. You're trailblazing a new avenue with this court case that you've organized the industry. And I want to congratulate you on your initiative and your strong leadership. So listeners and everybody concerned about the well-being of aviation. This was Kevin's story of CASA. Thank you very much for your attention thus far. Keep an eye on these clips. They will be regularly appearing from now on. Jan Lottering, International Air Affairs. Amen.